Thanks, Donna. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here tonight. I really love speaking here and coming here to attend service. I don't even care who's speaking at the time because I find the environment here so welcoming and so inviting. So it feels like the perfect session whenever I come, whether I'm speaking or just attending service. So thank you for opening your doors and your arms for allowing me to share. We just passed Thanksgiving, and some things were brought to me that I didn't know about Thanksgiving. Even when we got the story that we got in school, but there's a lot more backstory to that I wanted to share that connects with the message of Advent and what Donna shared perfectly for the message we're gonna have tonight. So in 1789, the Continental Congress, which governed the US from 1774 to 1789, issued several national days of prayer, humiliation, and thanksgiving. Can you imagine the Congress today issuing a national day of prayer, humiliation, and thanksgiving? It was, I look back on the from the intention from that event to where we are today, and not just the holiday of Thanksgiving, but where we are socially and politically. And it seems like a different planet, really, to have that intention as people, as at least a nation coming together to want to have the intention that our government would have a national day of prayer, of humiliation and thanksgiving. And in the 1700s, the individual colonies often observed days of Thanksgiving throughout the year. It wasn't just one special day. Thanksgiving was a day of prayer and fasting, not a day of feasting as it is today. So consider that. Imagine getting together with friends and family for days of fasting and prayer and recommitment and conviction of faith. Just getting together in your homes, no special places, and affirming the presence of God in us. Just imagine that. And that was a regular thing in the colonies. So finally, to make it official, Abraham Lincoln in 1863 issued a national, quote, national Thanksgiving, praise and prayer. And I invite the people of the United States to assemble on that occasion in their customary places of worship and in the forms approved by their own consciences, he says, render the homage due to the divine majesty for the wonderful things he has done in the nation's behalf, and invoke the influence of his Holy Spirit to subdue the anger which has produced and so long sustained a needless and cruel rebellion. And it goes on and on, but that was just the piece that stood out to me, that the president made this official proclamation and declaration of the official day of Thanksgiving as a statement of prayer and humility and coming together, and the opportunity to give thanks that we have the power to join spiritually with our brothers and sisters with whom we had conflict, cruel, brutal, bloody conflict for many years, and to be able to see our brothers and sisters differently. So imagine what our Thanksgiving in that spirit would look like today, as opposed to what it is now. So the topic for today is bravery is a requirement. And on the point of taking time to view any situation, any darkness, to use what Donna had shared in her opening, to use any darkness as an opportunity to affirm not the circumstances that are dark, but to affirm first that the presence of God is in us. So taking the opportunity to use any problem or circumstances as an opportunity first to affirm the presence of divine majesty, to use Abraham Lincoln's words, affirm that first and then go from there. That takes bravery. And I thought, after being a school teacher for so many years, what I noticed over time is that students have become much more blind to see nuances because the world has gotten so fast and so digital and so systemized that young people, everybody, every person has, because of our overstimulation, become more and more blind to the nuances of the world, the in betweens of the world. We get so fooled and so deceived by appearances and by actions and by attitudes that we don't see and we don't feel intention. And I think to take the pause, as Donna mentioned, to be able to ask our, on a basic level, our intuition to help us see and feel the intention and the purpose for every interaction and every moment that we're going through. It takes bravery to do that. When we've been conditioned in a world where we're supposed to be reactive, we've been conditioned and learned in a world that we're supposed to take certain things really seriously, and we're supposed to be offended by certain things, and we're supposed to put our attention on certain things that we deem to be that call our attention. And since we're so overstimulated by media and options to distract our attention away and options to keep our minds busy, we're so overstimulated. It does require bravery to slow ourselves down and to pause, to be intentional about pausing and to affirm our moments from our hearts, grounded in the presence of the divine, first before we act and before we speak and before we do anything, to realize there's a bigger purpose here. It takes a lot of bravery when everybody else is swirling and going fast and taking things so seriously, losing themselves and losing their minds. When the world appears to be losing its mind and going insane, it takes a lot of bravery to slow down and be intentional about living from our hearts and affirming in our hearts the presence of God first before we step out into that movie of the world where the pace seems so frantic and hectic and so serious. So, the bravery as a requirement is my invitation from the Spirit to me, to you, to be intentional about waking up every day. I love when Michael Beckwith, a minister from huge agape ministries out in Los Angeles, he says that we not only have an attention deficit, beneath our attention deficit is our intention deficit. Because we get out of bed and the first thing we do is distract ourselves. We put the news on, we pick up the phone, and so we get out of bed after a night of sleep when our minds are wide open in our subconscious and we're very susceptible to influences and darkness that can get in when our minds are asleep. We get up and we go right back to sleep in an awaking state by staying overstimulated. Phones, uh, the news, the technology, just a general frantic pace. We dive right back into this movie as soon as we get up. And so we don't take space and we don't take a moment to pause and find intention, to even ask for intention if we don't have one, just to make the point of asking whoever we pray to, or just asking our higher self, or asking inwardly. Help me find some intention in this moment, a bigger purpose than just doing stuff. Help me find a bigger purpose than just going out in the world and going through the motions, going through the heavy, burdensome motions of my day that I don't really feel moved and inspired by. Help me find some intention to be of a higher place and a higher service to all. That way, every little thing I do becomes purposeful and becomes driven and becomes given me, not just something that I have to slave through and burden through the day. Help me find some intention in the smallest things. I think the biggest thing that shifted the last couple years for me is that For many years doing the spiritual study called the Course in Miracles, I was really big into mind training. And mind training is essential, I feel, if we want to slow our minds down and open up ourselves to the divine presence, the God presence in us. Mind training is absolutely essential. But what's come to me in the past year or so, more deeply, is that the best way to train our minds to hear and to receive and tap into the frequency of our Creator in us, the best way to hear that and tune into that is not directly through our individual mental minds, it's through our hearts. That many of you might hear stuff that floats out there with spiritual teachers, even scientists that are now studying very deeply this connection between mind and heart on a physical level that opens the doorway to higher levels of consciousness that would not be available had we not had that tie-in between mind and heart. So my invitation to you when you go out this door tonight is that you always find something useful that you can put to work right away. I tell the students, if you don't find anything useful that you can use right away when you leave class today, then there's no point of coming to class. There has to be a bigger intention about showing up to class and coming to church and coming to service or opening a book or going to a study group. There has to be a bigger intention. So my invitation is to you is to, throughout the day, as often as you can remember, to settle in our heart, lead from our heart, identify from our hearts first before we identify as an individual, fighting, competing, separating ourselves, noticing each other's separation out here in this world of separate identities and separate interests and competing interests and separate goals and conflicting ideologies. I invite everybody to be brave, and as often as you can remember, as Donna mentioned, take that sacred pause and be intentional about living from our heart space. Just the point of pausing and resting in our heart center. And if you do some prayer or meditation from that point to bless from our hearts, do what comes easy. I always say we need a spiritual practice that is simple and that is basic and something easy to remember because our minds are overly distracted. So we need to give it the opposite and make our spiritual practice very simple and user friendly for us. So as often as we can, I invite us to live from our hearts. Take a sacred pause during the day, and in the smallest, most basic of tasks that we go through the day and we get caught up, we get bored, we get fed up, we get irritated, we're tired, we're fatigued, we're cranky, we might not have slept well. The drive might have been longer. If we're working from home, we just might not be feeling very energetic in going through our day-to-day duties and obligations. I invite you to take those moments when we would be really irritated and really fed up and really disconnected and disinterested and unintentional. Take those many, many moments during the day to pause and rest in our hearts and extend blessing from there. However you do that, extend the Creator's intention, extend love, extend on a basic level just appreciation for the opportunity to serve all of creation in the simplest of ways of just remembering. Our ability to just remember that we are here to bless and join, as our National Day of Thanksgiving reminds us of our deeper purpose here, that we're here just to come together, just to join with our brothers and sisters that we might have differences with, just to join with our brothers and sisters that we would otherwise not want to join with. Nations, people, nationalities, religion, all of the differences that keep us in a separation consciousness, our ability to live and see from our hearts, to see with the eyes of creation from our heart center with practice, with repeated pause during the day, makes our mind more alive. energizes our mind in such a way to where we live in an aligned place that I can't really describe to you, but it feels nothing like what most of us goes through the day as now. When our hearts and our mind are joined up and linked up, we have a presence that we radiate and an awareness that we live in and a confidence that we know in that is really indescribable. And it's so beautiful that I can't really describe beyond what I just said. It's simple, but it does take practice. It's always there for us, but it does require us to discipline ourselves to remember to step back and pause and ask whoever you pray to help us remember to settle back in our God-given hearts and then extend presence and extend creation and extend blessing, extend the light, extend joining, extend oneness, extend anything that might come to you in a simple way to give you a higher sense of purpose and of knowing and of intention other than just doing what we're doing physically. Because if we're stuck in the doing, if we're stuck in the physical happenings of what's going on, of what might be upsetting us, or what we did, or what other people might have done, or what people may have done to us, or vice versa, if we're just stuck in the physical interaction, then we'll never get to that deeper intention that can lift us out of that physical prison and that keeps us locked in time and events and sequence and what happened and what might happen and the burdens of the past that what did happen. To be able to step out of that, our heart center offers us a path to accelerate and speed up and to live above the battleground, as Jesus says in the Course in Miracles, to be able to live and not deny our human experience, but to actually live more fully human from a place of our God heart center and to be able to use our human experience to be able to reconnect and remember and join back with that powerful Christ presence in the center of our being. So that's my invitation to you in this message about bravery being a requirement, because it does take bravery to even just practice, even if we don't believe it. You know, Jesus said in the Course in Miracles that our belief is not a powerful contribution to the truth. We don't even have to believe something for it to work and for us to evolve spiritually. We just have to practice it. We just have to practice it. And it does take bravery for us to look at a world that looks really insane and cruel and brutal, and where dehumanizing each other becomes fashionable, and putting people down and attacking people personally has become so fashionable. It takes bravery in this world to step back from that and rest in our hearts and bless that and to shine some presence on that and awareness. Not that we have to agree with anything or endorse anything. I'm not saying that. It takes bravery just to affirm first and foremost that in our hearts, in this world, as crazy as it seems, as brutal, as cruel, as separate as it seems, as attacking as it seems, that the presence of God in our hearts is the primary reality. That the presence of God or our Creator in us to the depths of our being, that's the first and foremost reality that we live in. We do not live and we are not prisoner to the circumstances of the conflict and the attack and the separation that seems to be regular and fashionable in the world. We are not prisoner to that. We have to deal with it. We have to see it. We have to walk through it. But we're not prisoner to that game and that invitation to be separate and attacking and at odds with each other and justifying those odds and justifying that attack on each other. We're not prisoners to that at all. If we can remember to take a sacred pause and step back and ask the Creator to help us live from that place and extend light from that place and extend the presence of the Creator to all brothers and sisters, even those people that we don't want to just extend the presence of the Creator and joining and coming together in oneness. Just extend that from our hearts without saying a word, without having to preach or say a word. Just extend that during our normal moment to moment, day by day, simple, mundane task during the day. The thing that's coming to me more and more often this last year or so has been the simplicity of using whatever comes up during the day as our primary spiritual practice. The people, the thoughts that show up right in front of us, that show up in our minds, that is the deepest, highest spiritual practice. To use that as an opportunity to rest in our hearts and see that thing differently, to embrace that thing in our minds and our hearts without having to say a word, and to allow the God presence in us to extend and to clarify and to clear our vision and our awareness and our perception of that experience in the simplest of ways during the day when we would normally mentally be checked out, lost in the task, lost in the detail of things, lost in the mundane of our daily duties and obligations. Being able to pause and step back and live from our God's in our hearts and embrace the action of where we find ourselves gives us a place of intention and clarity and purpose and a higher knowing that is indescribable. So that's my invitation to you to connect with and to energize the bravery that we all hold within us, but many times we ignore for choosing the rationale and the justification in the world to be stuck with the worldly circumstance and not feeling we can do anything about it. So I invite us all to embrace and to ask our presence in our hearts to energize that bravery and that courage in us to lead us first from that place. And I like to close with what I call Jesus' 4 points of power. The first point of power is to, as we go through the day, to see everything and everybody as an extension of ourselves. We don't have to believe it or agree with it or accept it. This is just a spiritual practice to help keep us intentional. See everything as an extension from our hearts, a reflection from our hearts as ourselves, and extend that spirit as we go through the day when we would normally be and feel separate and apart from each other and things, to see all and everyone as an extension, as a light reflected back, a mirror of ourselves. Two, avoid the temptation to attack each other for purposes of taking sides and justifying that attack based on the things that we've learned about why certain people ought to be condemned and attacked. Again, we don't have to lose our common sense, but there's an energetic component to attack and gossip, as our brother Angelo reminds us. There's an energetic component to attack and gossip and condemnation that blinds us to looking deeper to what those people are showing us about what's in our hearts and what's in our minds. So I invite us to be very mindful to not engage in personal attacks. Three, extend from our hearts a smile of childlike joy and childlike fun and laughter and playfulness from our hearts. Extend that sense and that smile of God, if you will, from our hearts to everybody without ever having to say a word. That helps keep our minds and our hearts intentional in spreading God-given intention and blessing as opposed to getting caught and feeling imprisoned by circumstance. And the last thing is to always, that voice in our minds that keeps us busy and keeps us slave often to fear, to always speak to ourselves in a voice that is kind, gentle, and unconditionally appreciative. When we want to attack ourselves, when we want to attack others, when we want to criticize ourselves or criticize others, to always rein that in and to take charge of that voice. If we don't take charge of our minds, it's going to take charge and control us. we have to take charge of that voice and remind ourselves to always, always, without fail, regardless of what we think we did, to speak to ourselves in a tone that is unconditionally kind, gentle, and appreciative, and see how our intention and our energy and our focus changes during the day when we can live from that place in our hearts consistently. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to come hear this. Thank you. Thank you. Acknowledge yourself for being here and hearing this.